morning, folks. Happy Friday, and welcome to another session of Azure Power Lunch. Today's topic is Azure Functions, and Aloha Friday to everyone. So let me just quickly share my presentation. One second. Can everybody see my screen and hear me?
Very well, yes.
Yeah, thank you. And Marcus, and if you can please relay any question which are on the IM window, I will really appreciate that.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So we are not, today's topic is a little bit time consuming, and we're going to be covering a lot Azure function and hopefully the durable function which have just goes in preview. So I'm going to skip the service update. We will cover it, hopefully, overall update in the next session. So this is quickly a blurb about myself who is just joining the first time. I have an Azure Solution Architect. So we are, since I'm in this role for 3-4 years, I used to be in Microsoft Consulting Services for 10 plus years. So application development is my core area and my passion. So moving forward, we're going to talk about Azure Functions. So Azure Functions is a part of serverless compute. So when we talk about computing paradigm, we have the infrastructure as service. I think everybody knows about it, where you are, it's basically about VMs and sometime or VM scale set and things like that, where you're running everything in a virtual machine. PaaS, platform as a service, where you are not concerned about the underlying infrastructure, but your application. And function as a service or serverless compute, where you're totally independent of the underlying infrastructure. You're basically running a piece of a code, responding to an event or running that piece of a code in the cloud. It doesn't matter where that piece of code runs, and if you wanna, it has to, let's say it has to process multiple requests in parallel. So there are multiple instances of that piece of code running. So Azure Function, Logic Apps, and Event Grid are an example of those. We have already done a session on Azure Logic Apps and Event Grid and Azure Function. Today we're going to talk about that. If you have any questions, please post them to IM window or unmute your microphone and speak up. So in terms of the here's what we're going to talk about. What is how you deploy them, develop them, how you deploy them, and how you monitor them. So in terms of development, you can do that development in Portal. So you don't need any tools. You can just do the development in Azure Portal. And you don't need that, and we'll take a look at it. It looks something like that, where basically you are you kind of are taking your code and doing it in a portal. It supports C# and C# and I think Node.js, and there are some experimental languages as well. Sorry for that special effect. I borrowed those slides for someone, and they had this animation. So in terms of Visual Studio, as a full-fledged Visual Studio experience, and we will take a look at that, where you can create the project in Visual Studio, develop it, deploy it. So you can do all that, and through Visual Studio, you can set up CI/CD pipeline. So and by the way, you can locally test those functions on your machine as well. Of course, you have to download the function runtime, so that you will need, but you can test those functions on-prem. If you are familiar with VS Code, VS Code is a Developer Studio is a same family as Visual Studio, but it runs on all platforms, Linux, Windows, Mac, and you can develop functions in that as well. So before we go any further, I'm just going to take you, we're going to go towards to a demo and look at how the Azure function works and things like that. So let's go to the creation experience of the Azure function. So I just gonna click on add a new. I'm just gonna type in function, and that's gonna give me a function app. I'm gonna do a create. So what you need to do is you need to give it a function name, and that has to be globally unique. So let's say and the demo, and then you want to pick, of course, is subscription. Do you want to use existing resource group or new? That's on you. And you want to use Windows or Linux. And this is very important, hosting plan. I think just pay attention to it when you're creating that function. If you can use both an app service plan and a consumption plan. What is the difference? For app service plan, you are going to be running on a Azure App Service plan. So if you don't, if you're not familiar with it, think of it as like a web form. So you select how many instances of B1, S1, or P1 you're going to have in an app service plan, and then run all your web applications, web API, web app, API app, and function app on it. So you are limited to that app service plan. If let's say you have to kind of run thousands of instances of Azure for that particular Azure function app, then your size of your app service plan may limit it. You can of course do auto scaling, but once again, it is limited by that. And if you run it, you will be charged for your app service plan no matter how many, no matter if you're not running any functions at all. So let's say you have an app service plan, you're only planning to run Azure Functions, then even if you're not running any function, you will be charged for that app service plan. On the other hand, if you choose the consumption plan, in that case, these functions will be run dynamically, and you will be charged on per per execution. So let's say that every day your function is running randomly, sometime in the morning, sometime at night, and it's doing 1,000, 2,000 runs, things like that. You will be only be charged for those runs. So this is kind of a truly the the cloud utopia, where you are only paying for what you are using. So that's just be aware of that fact, that whenever you're gonna be using this stuff, that's where you're gonna be. Be careful with what option you choose. If you are truly wanna take advantage of the consumption-based pricing, then use the consumption plan. And if you know that your function have a predictable use and that's how it's going to be used, then go ahead with an app service plan. Storage account. This storage account is basically used by your Azure function for storing some information, for logging, and if in the case of durable function, it uses queues from this storage account. Any question, Marcus, on the?
Not so far.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so that's how you will create it. It takes a couple of minutes to create a function. So since we are short on time, I'm not going to go ahead and create a function. Oh, by the way, this is the Linux preview. So you can do the Linux as well, but just keep in mind, right now, Linux only available, Linux function are only available for our app service. They're in preview and they're only available. There is no consumption plan available for the Linux. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so let's go in. I already have a function created. So let's go into more services. Okay, what's happening? So I click on function app. These are all the function app that I have based on my subscription. So once let's say you have created a function app, then what you can do is you can go ahead and you can create a function inside it. So I can go in and I can pick any of these templates. So I can go directly to the quick start, which you want to do webhook API, timer, or data processing, and one of those, or I want to do a custom function, and I can pick up from, and these are all the criteria. So there are core, there are API webhooks, there are data processing, then there are samples, monitoring, all of that. So let's pick a very simple example. We're just going to put HTTP trigger, and we're going to pick a C# language. So we're going to call it HTTP. And we're just going to use the authorization level of function. That's something to keep in mind. Basically, how you gonna, yeah, go ahead. Some question?
Yeah, I'm just asking some clarification. There was some question. Can a ASC connect to the Classic portal?
Sorry, can ASC connect to a function?
Connect to a connect to the Classic portal. I just asked some clarification
Okay,
on the
okay,
question.
okay, thank you. So what you can do is you can go ahead and function. And by the way, when you create the function, the authorization, that decides how this function is gonna be kind of be invoked through an API key per function level or per at the function app level and things like that. So this is basically a simple function. I mean, some value is passed in, and then you go ahead and you return so what we can call it hello from Azure Power Lunch. So we can just mention it here. And by the way, this here is very important. This shows you what files are there. So there's a function.json file and what to test. So if you just wanna, let's say, I just wanna save it, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna test this function. So in the request body, I'm gonna call it Friday as name, and I'm gonna just run this function. So if we run it, and it types in, and by the way, you will see these kind of a traces going on. So this is a simple example of running it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you one example of doing that in Visual Studio. In Visual Studio 2017, what you need to do is you just need to create a new project, and you just need to pick the category of Cloud Azure Functions, and then it will create your Azure Function app. And here you need to pick, so either you can pick Azure Function v1 or Azure Function Core v2. So just remember, by default, if you create the Azure Functions in Azure, if you deploy it, it creates a v1 function, and you have to go in and you have to enable that to support v2. So if you do a v2 function, then you won't be able to on Visual Studio on-prem. Then you have to make sure when you are deploying it, you deploy it into a Azure function which supports v2. And by the way, you can change that setting, that runtime, from the application setting. So just sorry for a quick switch and back and forth switch. So you need to go to Azure Functions, and you need to go to function app settings, and what you need to do is, okay, with existing. So if you have existing function, you cannot upgrade an app. So basically, what you need to do is when you create a new function, um, you can do this. You can change this from here, and you can make it a beta, which is one is the release one, and the beta is basically the .NET Core 2.0 support, which is currently in beta. Okay, so moving back, we go here, and let's say that we pick a and let's say that we once again do a timer trigger. We're going to use a storage account, and that storage account we're going to pick a account from here, and that's pretty much it. So what it will do is it will take a couple of seconds to create the project, and we can say hello from VS 2017, and we can build this function, and we can quickly oh, by the way, you can change it from here. You can call it and by the way, we can just build this function, and by the way, as I said, we can test this function on this machine. So let's debug and test it here. So let's see if this thing. So as you can see, this runtime is running here, and it is downloading that function, and it's going to show you in a second that, okay, so this is the URL of the function, and what we can do is we can go into one second, we can go into git bash, and we can go into git bash, and we can just execute that here. So we're just using curl to execute. I'm gonna say name is equal to Friday. So once we run it, as you can see, it has traceback, so it returns the value hello from Azure Friday. Okay, so this is, and by the way, you can deploy it from here. Deployment experience is very similar to web app, so I can do publish, and I can select an existing app, and it's going to publish it there. So I'm not going to take time on it, since we're really short on time. Okay, monitoring. So monitoring is very important. There are two ways you can do, and by the way, the application insights integration has just been available now for Azure Functions. So now you can integrate application insights, and there are two ways you can do the integration with application insight. When you are creating a new function, you can go in and you can add the application insight, and you can say turn on application insight. If not, if it's an existing function, you can go to the function app, you can go to the application settings, and you can add here a application instrumentation key. So app insights instrumentation key, and basically get it from your app insight instance, add that value here. So for example, I go into this app insight instance, and for example, this one, I can go in here and I can get the instrumentation key from here, and let me paste the key here. So you can just add a new application setting, Into your function, add new setting. This is your application instrumentation key, and this is its value. So once you paste it, now your information will start going into uh, App Insights. Okay, so I can save the value. This is gonna save the update setting. So if I run the function, for example, I'm running this function here. Let me run it a few times. Um, let's see what happens. I think it's a cold start since we changed the app setting, so it may have reset the worker process. So that's why it's kind of a. By the way, this particular function is running on an app service plan, so that may be the reason. Okay, anyways, once that execution is complete, so let's run it a few times. So I think it was a cold start, and once we go here into this one, then we should see some activity here. It takes a few seconds for the data to get here, so we will, after some time, we will see some activity here. Let's see. Okay. So yeah, let's refresh it a few times. Okay, in any case, what it should do is it will, I mean, for each run, it's gonna start putting that value there. So we should see that in that. So that's how the monitoring will be working. So new application. Okay, we have 6 minutes. I wanna spend a few minutes on the durable functions. So let's say that you, and by the way, I will upload that deck so you can take a look at it. So let's go quickly on the durable function. Let's look at a few slides. Okay, this is for long running function. So let's say that you wanna handle some complex scenario like chaining, like fan in, fan out. You wanna call one function to the other. You can do it today. I mean, you can definitely use a queuing mechanism, put message in a queue, the other function reads it and do it all the way. But that require some work in cases a lot of work. So what durable function does, by the way, this is currently a preview feature, and there is right now no JSON schema. Everything is done through C# designer. And what it does is it does checkpointing. So let's say that during this flow that you're doing chaining from function 1 to function 2 to function 3 to function 4, and at function 3 there was some crash of hardware or something in data center, it will pick up from right there where it left off. Okay, so that's kind of a very important thing. It is built on durable task framework. If any one of you is familiar with, if you are familiar with TPL in C#, task parallel library, it's very similar to that, but it's allow you to do the durable, these durable functions possible. Okay. So moving forward, so this is one pattern where you want to call one function and that does some work, and then that calls another function, then that calls another function, and then finally there's another function calls in the end. Okay, you can do it, but there is no visualization between functions and queues. I mean, you can do it through the queues, but it would be hard to do. It add more complexity will be added because you have to add those queues in the middle, and you have to do error handling, and the whole thing become after the chain become a little longer, gets out of hand. That's how you will do it in Azure Functions using durable function. So this is how you will call it. Let's say there are four functions, F1, F2, F3, and F4, and you will call all of those functions with await. Um, that's, if you remember, this was some. So what it is doing is it is not waiting for the first call. The first call, it's kind of a it's not waiting for that call. As that call completes, it will come back to it and it's move on to the next one, move on to the next one. So there is this async pattern built in to this durable function. That's how it's working. So, and then you have the error handling and compensation that goes here. Okay, fan in and fan out. I mean, fan in and easy. Fan out is easy. You can send messages to a queue and then. But what about fan in? So let's say you send a lot of spun up a lot of tasks or function, but then you wanna wait for all those functions to finish, or maybe 80% of those to finish, or 60% of those to finish, and then to move on. That's how you will do it in a durable function. So basically, this is a work batch, and by the way, this is a sample as well, where you are executing a work batch, I mean, a set of work batch, maybe 100, 200, 300 functions and instances, basically, they're all executing. And then you're using task.when all. When all those tasks are complete, then you are moving on. So this is kind of something which makes kind of doing these parallel tasks doing very easy. Just keep in mind you can do the same thing in logic apps. So there are multiple ways of doing this thing, but at the same time, Azure Function allows you to do this thing through code. So if whatever you're comfortable with, follow that, and that's available currently in private preview. We have 2 minutes, so I just want to leave time for any questions. Okay. So in regards to the resources, there are some resources in the end. So please try those out. Um, there are functions available, the durable function samples available. Just search for, use Bing or Google to search for Azure Functions Durable. And you have to install some of the stuff that you have to set up your function in Azure to enable, just like that, the beta support, to have those templates enabled, and then you can kind of run those functions. We are a bit short on time, that I was not able to show you the demo of durable functions, but just keep in mind that's something that is available in your toolbox. So thank you everyone for joining today, and hope to see every one of you next week for another session of Azure Power Lunch. Have a very happy week. Thank you.
Thanks, Naveed. Awesome.
Thank you.